Welcome back to another episode of the DailyFlip podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're going to be flipping through a story coming from NPR. Normally we talk about more U.S.-focused stories here, but today we're going to be looking towards the rest of the world and addressing/discussing an issue that pervades every single part of the world. The headline from this article reads, "How many kids go to work instead of school?" And of course, we'll end with something a little bit more happy, just to make sure you leave with a smile on your face. You're ready to take on the day. But with that said, let's jump into our daily debate. At what age should a child be able to get a work permit? In many different areas, it's either 15, some places it's 14, though it's pretty standardized, and I believe 14 is the youngest. Is there an argument for 12, 13, so on and so forth? I think that we'll get into my opinion, but I want to hear yours, so throw it down into the comment section. With that said, let's actually jump into the article. I already gave you the title. I already said it was from NPR. Let's actually read the very first paragraph. Quote, "Child labor sounds as if it belongs to a long ago era, but for 138 million children, it is a daily routine." And this report comes from UNICEF. That's the one that they're actually quoting here. Now, before we go absolutely crazy, we do want to acknowledge that we've come a long way when it comes to addressing these issues and trying to get children into school. There's a paragraph here that highlights this progress. Quote, "We have nearly halved the number of children involved in child labor globally since 2000, from 246 million to the 138 million children that we had just discussed." That quote comes from Theresa Bethencourt. Don't know how to pronounce your name, ma'am, but she's the director of the program on children and advisory at Boston College, end quote. So, what is the tragedy on multiple levels of having children working rather than in school or doing something else? And you may be thinking, Alex, what do you mean it's the tragedy? It's the kids shouldn't be working. But we have to actually understand why we care about that on a societal level. Because to pretend as though children weren't used for their labor for generations upon generations would be naive. And we have to understand why we think it's better for them to spend their time doing this rather than helping us on the farms. Because it is a huge societal shift that we happen to go through here in the United States, that the West went through, different areas in China, all of these different places have gone through them at different times. But in China, it's still the case that young kids work on their farms with their parents. In other areas in Thailand, I'm absolutely certain that actually happens here in America. Though, is it less forced labor where they're actually getting a wage or they're working with their family? Those are different situations, but the point still stands that there are still younger children working in these areas, in farms across the United States, and other jobs as well. To pretend as though it is not happening in the United States would be naive. There are families, there are people who are desperate, who need to actually use their children as another form of income, or have their children be another form of income if you don't like the term used. But the question is, why did we switch away from this in the first place? Because we understand why we were there. We were desperate. We needed labor. We needed support. This is why we had abundance amount of children, among plenty of other reasons. And you love your children to death, but they are an extra mouth to feed, so they have to fight for what they get, essentially. In a true survivalist, society-free form perspective. So what is the value of having children not working and actually cultivating their mind? Well, one, we don't lose as many children, and if a society's job is to preserve children, you take them away from things that are dangerous. You take them away from the jobs that are actually going to be bad for them. And then, or at least dangerous for them. And then, what do we do with that time? Well, we actually cultivate their mind. We, in the United States, I speak solely as in the United States here, though it is true in other places, we want to prepare our children to go out and be able to make money. If they don't have a productive skill on the farm, they have to be able to make money somewhere else so they can be self-sustaining. At least nowadays, that is a lot of the perspective. Though some people want them to be their children to stay home and support the family and build them up. That's obviously another motivator. In general, the idea is that your child doesn't stay home forever. They don't stay with the family forever. They go and be self-sustaining, which means they have to have skills and knowledge and intellectual curiosity, critical thinking skills in order to be able to make money. That is why we send them off to be developed. Also, we realized over time that human capital, simply what it can produce in labor, hard labor, can be replaced by other things like machines and buffaloes and all this sort of thing, all these different animals. And the one thing that other things cannot provide us, even some of these large language model, even AI, which you could argue is being replaced, is true thinking. Not just, oh, hey, I've been told to do this. I can understand the concept of this and, complex thinking to that degree because LLMs have taken that. But creative thinking, innovative thinking, critical thinking, though it does seem that AI is actually emulating critical thinking now too, which is a fascinating discovery. The point being that there is something about our consciousness that is unique, and cultivating the thing that surrounds that consciousness that in theory enables that consciousness is the brain. And by making sure that they are a prepared student by learning more, absorbing more information, synthesizing more information, and being able to not only look to the past but project into the future, and therefore can come up with new solutions. They can create new systems. They can simply be of service to people. This is actually a more effective way in the way that our economy is structured in order to make money and be self-sustaining, as well as it also decreases, as I mentioned earlier, the likelihood that any of these children are going to be in dangerous situations while they are cultivating their mind, because normally these schools are relatively safe compared to being in a giant farm where you're dealing with combines and wild animals and potholes, snakes, all these among the back-breaking labor that will hurt you for the rest of your life, when that's the final factor, trying to extend the lifetime of these children, not only because we want our society to live on, we want them to be able to foster to the next generation, pass down their wisdom, but also simply because it's human capital wasted if they don't live long enough. And I know all that sounds very base, but these are, in my opinion, some of the baseline inspirations, reasons that this actually changed. Because you can say that we wanted to do it from a value sense. From a value sense. Oh, yes, we wanted to make sure our children aren't getting hurt. We wanted to make sure they're the smartest possible. But the only reason those baseline assumptions hold is because of practical reasoning, reasons that these things are actually good, studies, or at least anecdotal experience that proved people could be more useful in the workplace, that they could be more self-sustaining, they could bring in more value for their company, they can bring more value across the United States, they can make the United States bigger, therefore giving the United States more power on the world stage economically, therefore enriching the United States, therefore providing a level of prosperity. Now, of course, you can't say it's all a giant plan, but you can see the natural knock-on effects, especially in a relatively free economy, though it is a mixed one. These sort of incentives, if they don't take hold, it means that they're not widely accepted and people don't see the value, from the individual to the business person to the government. Now, if they do take hold, you can see a broader plan. Now, of course, some people will argue that school came around because of Rockefeller and he wanted more people who are used to working, and it provides a nice little path out to the factory. Fair enough. I think all those things are true, but at least in the idealistic sense, people didn't believe that when they were sending their kids to school. And then with the knock-on effect of the extra value added afterwards was something that people experienced rather than something that was planned, and that's why it took hold. So why is this terrifying across the world that children are still working? Let me give you some stats. Quote, Asia has embraced the philosophy with positive results. The percentage of children who work has dropped from 13% in 2008 to just 3% in 2024, from 114 million to 28 million. But the rest of the numbers that are really terrifying is, quote, and the report points out here, there has only been a slight improvement. This is in sub-Saharan Africa, with, quote, a rate dropping from 25% in 2008 to 22% in 2024. So if we're going to go with the really hard knuckle, mean perspective, there's a lot of human capital being wasted. There's a lot of human capital that could be cultivated better, that could be provided with relatively, in most school systems don't always provide good meals, but the point being at least a safe space in order to cultivate their mind, less back-breaking labor, meaning they need less high nutrients food, which is hard to come by in certain locations, therefore limiting, if they don't get that nutrients, limiting their brain, the ability for their brain to grow. But also simply providing a community where multiple people can come together and share for the sake of the children, and therefore provide nutritious food, which actually helps children's brain grow, on top of the fact that they're learning things. Like I said before, they're understanding context. They are absorbing information in a way that they can synthesize it and then put it out into something new, creative, or at least productive. So all those things are true. Now, the more general question, should we loosen, in my opinion? I'm going to tack it on here at the end because I went a little bit longer than I wanted to, though I thought it was important to actually discuss why this is something that we cultivated over time. And this is my hypothesis as to why we've cultivated over time, though I'm sure most of it would be borne out in truth, because all of those things that I stated are relatively logical knock-ons, though of course I leave room to always be wrong. But the point being, should we allow, in the United States and other places, children to work from a younger age? And people look at me crazy when I say this, but I would say you should be able to get a work permit at 12. I think if your family owns a business, you're working there from 8. I think it actually allows you, not that you're doing back-breaking labor like in the mines or in the field, but if you have any way that you can contribute to your family, you feel invested in your family, but also you're giving back to your family, and you're just learning how to operate within the world and be a person who is not only informed of the social structure, but also common sense. Because when you're working in these areas, you're probably problem solving, even to the smallest degree. If you can't reach that top shelf in order to put the air freshener back at your dad's car shop, well, guess what? Maybe you say, hey, Dad, can you fix it for me? Or maybe he shows you how to do it with a ladder. Maybe you find a new way to do it. Maybe you do something stupid and try to climb up and put it on there. And maybe it works one time, maybe it doesn't work the next time. But the point being that it allows you to have a goal that is something that's relatively structured. You're helping out your family, and also it teaches you the value of putting in that time and effort, and allows you to create creative solutions, which is exactly what common sense is, in my opinion. But hey, maybe I'm thinking a little bit too much into it, and I always leave room to be argued against, because I'm sure there are plenty of examples of exploitation where it's taken a little bit too far by some of the parents who want their kids to work with them. So with that said, let's actually jump into our Daily Delight. This one comes from our friends at Dogtime. Headline reads, video, dog tries to keep owner in check after they laugh too loud. And the little scowl on this dog's face, like I said, it is a video. The little scowl on this dog's face is absolutely hilarious. If you want a little bit of a smile after this long and pretty serious episode, you can go down to the description, where both this article and the other article that I was talking about from NPR will be linked below the like and subscribe button. Also down there, you can find the podcast on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Podvine, as well as the Twitter handle at @YourDailyFlip, where I post the links to these episodes that come out on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, as well as the 6 and 6 show that comes out on Tuesday and Thursday. So with all that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe. Don't die.